Let's see. Let's talk to Kay. Kay, who's calling in from the UK. Kay from the UK, what's going on?
Hey Ben, hey Dan, how's it going?
Doing all
Going all
right. How about
good.
you?
Just defending,
Yeah,
how why slavery actually isn't good. Just another Sunday here at the ACA. It's very fun.
yeah.
So, mhm.
I was tempted to pretend that I was going to also defend it, but I thought you might just hang up immediately.
We might have, honestly. But hey, you're
Yeah.
here talking to us now. What's going on, Kay?
Okay, so this is a bit of a follow-up to the first call in terms of religion motivating people to do a good thing. A little bit of background: I was a Jehovah's Witness for 34 years. I'm 3 years out now, and the ACA shows have been brilliant for me in kind of deconverting. So I appreciate all of your work. But what I think is that sometimes people, because they believe in God and their religion, if those religions are telling them to do good works, they will do them because they think that's what God wants, even if
Yep.
maybe without religion, they wouldn't do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I'm of the opinion that if you're a narcissistic billionaire, for example, and you want to donate $1 million to a charity because it makes your ego feel good, I would say that's still a good act. I mean, I'm one of those people that isn't going to question the good that actually comes from an act like that. Like, is it for selfish reasons? Sure, but even for a lot of people that do volunteer work, end up doing it for selfish reasons on some reason or another. I mean, look, I love being a host. And I love getting to talk to people. Like, I get something out of it. This is more than just regular volunteer work for me. I get something that a lot of people don't get in their volunteer roles. So yeah, I'm definitely even guilty of that kind of motivated reasoning. Of course, in religion, right, it is a bit different because there is a systematic understanding of why you're doing good, right? And it's like you have this person that you're trying to appease, and that can come into conflict with your own moral identity, what you think. For example, if you have a friend who is part of the LGBT community, but your religion tells you you can't be friends with them, then that's going to come into conflict, right? So there's still some bad thinking that happens there. There's still some stuff that prevents people from doing good. So it's a, I don't know, it's a tough thing to consider. I'm not going to discredit, as I said earlier, people who donate their time towards civil rights activism, for example, who are motivated for their religious reasons. I mean, I'm not going to say that their time wasn't worth it or wasn't well spent in doing that, but it does come into suspect when we talk about the methodologies for why people are doing the things that they do. It may influence other areas of their life. So anyway, Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, my thoughts. It's kind of a double-edged sword here because, yeah, on the one hand, I don't want to dismiss somebody's
Hmm.
good acts. Like a great example of this is with the health system, and especially with Catholic churches. There are Catholic hospitals. Sorry, there are lots of Catholic hospitals, especially in my area, and they do great work. They have great doctors, great nurses, great auxiliary staff that are employed at these hospitals, and they are helping people. They are providing necessary healthcare. But the question is then, a lot of times they're either holding people hostage, number one, in order to get this. You have these medical mission trips that go out, and a lot of them under religious banners, and they'll provide people great care, but they'll force you to listen to a sermon at the end of it, or they'll find some way to get their agenda across to them. So it's clear that yeah, they're doing this great act, but they're keeping these people hostage to listen to their ideas. And then you have this mask of doing good in this way, to where you're doing good healthcare, but then also on the other hand, a lot of these hospitals are removing access to abortions and removing access to contraception. So, despite having the veil of doing a good thing for the community, they might actually be also doing harm. So, the question is, how do we allow these people to continue their good works, but still uh, prevent them from causing harm in those other areas that might not be completely obvious? If does that kind of make sense where I'm going with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a valid point. I think I'm just trying to separate the two things at the moment in terms of the religion or the God belief can motivate someone. But yeah, on the flip side, if you believe in the God and the rules of the religion you're in, you will certainly do damage to other parts of society based on those beliefs, particularly if they're archaic beliefs that come from the Bible, the Quran, etc. What you were saying about obviously getting something out, we get something to our ego when we do good things. It makes me, this is a different question maybe for a different show, but it makes me wonder, can you ever do something completely selflessly, or is there always some kind of ego kickback involved?
Well, I honestly don't know if you can do something completely selflessly, because I think whether it's the ego aspect of getting satisfaction for doing something good, other times you might be doing something because you value the other person, in that if it's your parent or your sibling or a friend, it's not entirely selfless if you do something nice for them, because you have benefited in a way from their relationship with you. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have extrinsic motivators, but we do have to be cautious with what motivators are we relying on to make those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, is it possible to do an act without any kind of benefit to you whatsoever that we consider good? That might be hard. I don't know. It's obviously a very talked about question in philosophy. It is possible, I think, to make an act that for the most part isn't going to do you any favors in the short term, and maybe you be considered a hero in the long term. For example, sacrificing your life to save a child from a fire or something, like, yeah, like that's not going to do anything for you in the bodily form, but maybe your name lives on as somebody who's considered a good person. So, that's another thing to think about. But in terms of just what people who have religious beliefs are doing every day versus people who aren't doing religious beliefs every day, my moral code, my way of thinking about things is completely different now since I was a Christian. I genuinely thought that there was a sort of as some people have put it, a quasi dictator that was looking over me and was going to judge my acts as good or bad based on that. But now I get to make a more developed and more sophisticated system of right and wrong that will lead to me to have come to divergent conclusions as other Christians. And that just reflects the complications and nuances of the world that religious tracks often don't have. We talked about this several times on this show. I've talked to liberal Christians and I love where their heart's at. And I know like a lot of them want to do good for the world, but I do think they're seeing that because they're seeing the human harm that happens when you don't. I think it's coming from a human place more than a place that has to come from a text or from a belief in a God or whatever. I think that there's something
Mhm.
deeper to that where we're both tapping
Yeah.
into there just as people.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because being a Jehovah's Witness
Mhm.
for so long, I was
Yeah,
brought up with, many beliefs that I do not hold anymore. For
sure.
example, obviously LGBTQ, that was just
Yeah,
no, they're evil, they're going to be destroyed at Armageddon. We don't associate with
of course,
those people. And I
of course.
believed that. And I thought those people were disgusting. And now that I'm out of that religion, I have absolutely no problem with anyone like that at all. And I don't,
Of course.
I obviously now feel that anyone that views it in the other way is disgusting themselves.
Yeah.
And the Jehovah's Witnesses are interesting because they don't help the community at all. They don't feed the homeless. They don't go out and do any charity stuff. They think that their greatest charity is by preaching the word door to door. And since I've
Yeah.
left, I've volunteered in a mental health hospital. I work on a suicide line. I've done more good in 3 years than I did in 34 years of being in that religion.
That's great. That's great. That's great that that's happened for you. And yeah, I feel like I talk about a lot about LGBT issues, even though I'm a cis straight dude, because I was one of those people that also felt very negative feelings about the LGBT community, and I realized almost all of that was coming from my religious beliefs. When I actually got to talk to people from those communities and realize, oh, they have beliefs just like I do, and they're just regular people just like I do, and also hearing from Christian members of the LGBT community was also an interesting reshaping and reframing of how you could interpret this text. It also made me realize you can reframe and reshape this text to say anything, really. And so I don't need this text to inform what I think is right and wrong. It's actually I've outgrown it. I really have, and it sounds like you have too. I think that's how a lot of people feel when they come out of that religious community. That there's more than one book you can read that talks about what's right and what's wrong and how that helps and hurts people, right? So, a lot
Mm.
to consider there. Ben, what any last thoughts?
Well, I mean, kind of something that was brought up in my mind when you mentioned the running into a house fire to save a baby thing, and just
Yeah.
the thought that potential regret is a very powerful motivator, regardless of what background you come from. Like, if as a human, we can weigh options and make choices based on what we perceive the outcomes to be. And for someone who knows that it's not a good idea to let a baby burn in a fire, and that the potential outcome of a baby dying in a fire is damage to not only the baby but to the baby's family, to the community, and seeing the potential harms from that, and knowing that if I were to let one of two outcomes play out, regardless of what happens to me, if I didn't take the action to spare those people of the harm to them, I might face an incredible amount of regret. I might spend the rest of my life regretting that I didn't do it. So
Mm,
even though, yeah, you're doing something beneficial for these people and trying to mitigate the harm, you're also mitigating the harm for yourself of how much am I going to regret my actions in the future?
you're
And I
true.
think
That's
like we
true.
ignore the amount of power that regret has, or potential regret has, on the way that we conduct ourselves.
That's true, Ben. You're right. The calculus in which we make decisions is we always find to be more complicated than meets the eye, and that's a good point there. Okay, I think that's all the time that we got for this particular call, but I hope our insights gave you something to think about, something to I don't know, reflect upon. But I think you and I are probably on the same page, right? Our view of morality, whether it's objective, subjective, or universal, however you want to think about it, is certainly more complicated than it was when we were in religious communities because religious communities didn't often give us the tools to think about how to honestly reflect and make decisions based on human needs and human wants. It wasn't about what humans wanted, it was about what God wanted. And that is definitely a system that can lead to bad things, even if you have good intentions, even if you want to help other people and do your best, because uh, when it comes to that level of interpretation, I don't know, you can say anything and make anything happen.